There are moments when silence becomes unbearable, when the weight of what remains unseen, unheard, crushes the soul of anyone who dares to look. In the winter of 2019, on a forgotten stretch of highway outside Timber Falls, Wyoming, a widow named Beatrice drove past an abandoned farm she'd passed 1,000 times before. But on this particular morning, something made her stop. A feeling, a pull she couldn't explain. What she found behind the rotting fence of that property would shatter her and resurrect her. A pregnant mare, chained in darkness, left to die alone. A story of cruelty so profound it seemed impossible, and a journey of healing that would prove one truth: love, when given freely, can rebuild even the most broken lives. This is that story. Before we begin, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt called to do something you couldn't explain, like some invisible force was guiding you toward a purpose you didn't yet understand? Because that's what happened to Beatrice. She didn't plan to save a life that day. She didn't even know there was a life to save, but she listened to that voice inside her and everything changed. If you've ever felt that pull, if you've ever rescued an animal or wished you could, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what city or country you're watching from. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and subscribe, because stories like this need to be heard. Now, let's go back to that cold January morning. Let's go back to the moment Beatrice's life changed forever. Beatrice Caldwell had been a widow for 5 years. Her husband, a firefighter named Donovan, had died in the line of duty, saving 3 children from a burning apartment building. He was 42 years old. They had been married for 19 years and had no children. Beatrice had struggled with infertility, and they'd eventually made peace with it, pouring their love into their community, their friends, their small ranch on the outskirts of Timber Falls. After Donovan died, Beatrice sold the ranch. She couldn't bear to stay there, surrounded by memories of the life they'd built together. She moved into a small rental house in town, took a job at the local library, and tried to disappear into routine. She didn't date, didn't socialize much, didn't talk about Donovan except when someone asked. And even then, she kept it brief. People said she'd shut down. That grief had turned her into a shadow, and maybe they were right. Beatrice felt like she was living underwater, everything muted and distant, her emotions sealed behind glass. On the morning of January 14th, Beatrice was driving to work. She took the back roads, the ones that wound through open country, past ranches and fields and abandoned homesteads. She liked the quiet, liked the way the snow-covered mountains looked in the pale winter light. She was listening to the radio, some talk show she wasn't really paying attention to, when she felt it, a pull. She couldn't explain it. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a thought. It was just a knowing, deep in her chest, that she needed to stop. She slowed the car, looking around confused. There was nothing here, just an old property on the left side of the road, a sagging farmhouse with boarded windows, a barn that looked like it might collapse at any moment, and a rusted barbed wire fence half buried in snowdrifts. But the pull persisted. Beatrice pulled over onto the shoulder and turned off the engine. She sat there, hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding for no reason she could name. Then she heard it. A sound, faint, broken, desperate. A horse. Beatrice got out of the car. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and biting. She walked toward the fence, boots crunching in the snow, and listened. There it was again. A whinny, high-pitched, weak. She climbed through the barbed wire, careful not to tear her coat, and started across the field. The snow was deep, uneven, covering frozen ruts and debris. The barn loomed ahead, its door hanging open, creaking in the wind. Beatrice stepped inside. The smell was overwhelming. Rot, waste, death. The floor was covered in filth, old hay blackened with mold and excrement. There were broken tools scattered everywhere, rusted chains hanging from the rafters, piles of garbage shoved into corners. And in the back stall, barely visible in the dim light, was a horse, a mare. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. The mare was skeletal. Her ribs protruded sharply, each bone visible beneath skin stretched tight. Her coat was matted with filth, her mane tangled and crusted with ice. Around her neck was a heavy chain, bolted to a wooden post. The chain was so short the mare could barely turn her head. Her hooves were grotesquely overgrown, curling upward, cracked and bleeding. There was no food, no water, no bedding, and she was pregnant, heavily, visibly pregnant. Beatrice's knees nearly buckled. She took a step forward, and the mare flinched, eyes rolling white with terror. "Oh my God," Beatrice whispered. "Oh my God." The mare didn't move. She just stood there, trembling violently, her breath coming in shallow, labored gasps. Beatrice knelt in the filth, tears streaming down her face, and reached out her hand. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." The mare's eyes met hers. And in that moment, Beatrice saw something she recognized, the same brokenness she'd been carrying for 5 years. Beatrice didn't know what to do. She had no experience with horses. She didn't know how to help, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This mare was dying, and if she didn't act now, the foal would die too. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher, a woman named Rosemary, answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? There's a horse, Beatrice said, her voice shaking, on the old Harlow property off Route 19. She's chained up, starving, pregnant. I don't know how long she's been here, but she's dying. I need help. There was a pause. Then Rosemary's voice, careful and calm. I'm going to connect you with animal control. Stay on the line. Beatrice waited, her eyes never leaving the mare. She could hear her breathing, shallow and ragged. Could see the way her legs trembled, barely able to hold her weight. A man's voice came on the line. This is Officer Quincy with Animal Control. Tell me what you've got. Beatrice explained everything. The chain, the condition of the mare, the pregnancy. I'm 10 minutes out, Quincy said. Do not approach the animal. Do not try to remove the chain. Just stay with her. Keep her calm if you can. I'm not leaving, Beatrice said. She hung up and moved closer to the mare. She sat down on an overturned crate and began to talk. She told the mare her name, told her about Donovan, told her she was going to be okay. The mare didn't respond, but Beatrice thought she saw the trembling ease, just a little. Officer Quincy arrived with a veterinarian named Dr. Annette Mercer. Annette was in her 50s, tall and sturdy, with iron-grey hair pulled back in a braid. She took one look at the mare, and her jaw tightened. How long has she been here? Annette asked. I don't know, Beatrice said. I just found her. Annette knelt beside the mare, her hands moving quickly, checking vitals, listening to the foal's heartbeat, examining the chain. This property belongs to Walter Harlow, Quincy said. He died 8 months ago. The estate's been tied up in probate. No one's been out here since. 8 months, Annette said quietly. She's been chained here for 8 months. Beatrice felt sick. Annette stood up. We need to get her out of here now. Quincy, call for a trailer. I'll sedate her enough to cut the chain, but we have to move fast. She's in shock. The foal's heartbeat is weak. If we don't stabilize her in the next 24 hours, we're going to lose them both. Quincy made the call. Within 30 minutes, a livestock trailer arrived. Annette sedated the mare lightly, just enough to keep her calm. Quincy used bolt cutters to sever the chain. When it finally snapped, the mare staggered, her legs buckling. Beatrice caught her, held her steady, whispered reassurances. They led her slowly out of the barn. She could barely walk. Every step seemed to cost her everything. Beatrice walked beside her, one hand on her neck, tears streaming down her face. When they reached the trailer, the mare balked. She'd been trapped for so long, the idea of moving into another enclosed space must have terrified her. But Annette was patient. She spoke softly, offered oats, waited. Finally, the mare took a tentative step forward. Then another and another. She was loaded into the trailer. They drove to Annette's clinic, a small facility on the edge of town. Annette had worked with rescue animals her entire career. She'd seen cruelty before. But this, she said, was among the worst. The mare was unloaded and taken into the treatment room. Annette worked quickly, hooking up an IV for fluids and nutrients, cleaning the wounds on her neck where the chain had cut deep into her flesh, trimming her hooves, a delicate, agonizing process that took over an hour. Beatrice stayed. She didn't ask permission. She just stayed. "You should go home," Annette said gently. "Get some rest. I'll call you if anything changes." "I'm not leaving her," Beatrice said. Annette studied her for a moment. Then she nodded. "All right. There's a cot in the back room. Help yourself." Beatrice didn't sleep. She sat in a chair beside the mare's stall and watched her breathe. She counted each rise and fall of her chest. She prayed, even though she wasn't sure she believed in prayer anymore. By morning, the mare was still alive. Barely, but alive. The first week was a battle. The mare's body was shutting down. Her organs were failing. The foal was in severe distress. Annette worked around the clock, adjusting medications, monitoring vitals, doing everything she could to keep them both alive. Beatrice came every day. She brought fresh hay, apples, carrots. She brushed the mare's coat gently, careful not to hurt her. She sat with her for hours, reading aloud from books, talking about anything and everything. On the fourth day, the mare ate, just a few bites of an apple. But it was something. Annette smiled for the first time in days. "She's fighting," she said. "She's strong," Beatrice said. "She is, but she needs a name." Beatrice thought for a moment. "Seren," she said softly. "It means star in Welsh, because she's a light in the darkness." Annette nodded. "Seren, I like it." By the end of the second week, Seren was standing on her own. She was still weak, still dangerously thin, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She began to nicker softly when Beatrice arrived, began to follow her with her gaze. One afternoon, Beatrice was sitting in the stall, reading, when Seren walked over and rested her head on Beatrice's shoulder. Beatrice froze. Then, slowly, she wrapped her arms around Seren's neck and cried. "I know," she whispered. "I know what it's like to be broken. I know what it's like to think you'll never be whole again. But you will. I promise you. You will." Seren exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, and leaned into Beatrice's embrace. 3 weeks after the rescue, Annette sat Beatrice down in her office. "I did some research on the Harlow property," Annette said. Walter Harlow was a hoarder. He had over a dozen animals at one point. Horses, goats, chickens. Most of them died. A few were seized by animal control years ago. Seren was the last one. He chained her up and forgot about her. Beatrice's hands clenched into fists. "How could someone do that?" "I don't know," Annette said quietly. "But it happens more often than you'd think. Animals are abandoned, abused, left to die, and most of them are never found." Beatrice thought about that, about how close Seren had come to dying alone in that barn, unseen and unmourned. "What happens to the property now?" Beatrice asked. "It'll be auctioned off. The county wants to demolish the structures, clear the land." Beatrice sat in silence for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to buy it." Annette blinked. "The Harlow property?" "Yes." "Beatrice, it's in terrible shape. The house is uninhabitable. The barn is dangerous. It would take a fortune to fix." "I don't care," Beatrice said. "I want to buy it. I want to turn it into something good, a sanctuary, a place where animals like Seren can heal." Annette studied her. "You're serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Over the next 6 weeks, Beatrice worked with a lawyer to purchase the property. It was cheaper than she expected. The land was considered worthless. She used money from the sale of the ranch she'd shared with Donovan, money she'd been holding on to, unable to let go. When the sale went through, Beatrice stood in the middle of that ruined farm and made a promise. She would tear down the old barn. She would build a new one. She would create a sanctuary where broken animals could find safety, healing, and love. She hired a contractor named Felix, a quiet man in his 40s who'd built barns his entire life. He brought a crew. They cleared the debris, tore down the dangerous structures, laid new foundations. Beatrice worked alongside them. She hauled lumber, painted walls, installed fencing. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but for the first time in 5 years, she felt alive. Seren, meanwhile, was thriving. Her coat had filled in, glossy and chestnut brown. Her eyes were bright. She walked without pain, and her belly had grown round and heavy. Annette said the foal would come soon. The night Seren went into labor, Beatrice was asleep in the barn, the new barn, clean and warm and filled with light. She woke to the sound of hooves shifting, restless breathing. She sat up and saw Seren pacing in her stall, tail lifted, sides heaving. Beatrice called Annette. She arrived within 20 minutes, carrying her medical bag, her face calm and focused. "It's time," Annette said. They watched as Seren lay down, her body straining, her breathing deep and rhythmic. Beatrice knelt beside her, one hand on her neck. "You've got this, Seren," Beatrice whispered. "You're the strongest creature I've ever known. You've got this." The labor was long, painful. There were moments when Annette's face darkened with concern, moments when Beatrice's heart raced with fear. But Seren was a fighter, and just after midnight, the foal was born. A filly, small and perfect, with a coat the color of honey. Seren turned her head, nuzzled the filly gently and nickered. A sound Beatrice had never heard from her before. A sound of pure, unguarded love. Beatrice sat back, tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful," Annette said softly. "She's a miracle," Beatrice whispered. "What will you name her?" Beatrice thought for a moment. Then she smiled through her tears. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." In the months that followed, Beatrice's sanctuary, which she named Seren's Light, began to grow. She built 3 barns, each one clean and safe, with spacious stalls and soft bedding. She fenced in pastures where rescued animals could run free. She planted wildflowers along the fence line, and in the spring they bloomed in waves of yellow and purple. Word spread quickly. A local newspaper ran a story about Seren and Hope. A television station followed. Donations poured in from across the state, then across the country. People sent money, supplies, letters of encouragement. And the animals came. A gelding found wandering a highway, emaciated and covered in sores. A pony abandoned in a foreclosure, tied to a tree with no food or water. A donkey rescued from a hoarding situation. A goat named Maple, who'd been kept in a basement for 3 years. Beatrice took them all. She hired staff, a young woman named Iris, who'd studied veterinary science, a retired rancher named Hugh, who knew everything about horses, a college student named Felicity, who volunteered every weekend. Together, they created something extraordinary, a place where suffering ended, where healing began, where every animal was given a second chance. Beatrice worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She woke before dawn, fed the animals, cleaned the stalls, checked wounds, administered medications. She fell into bed each night, exhausted, her body aching, her heart full. One evening she was standing at the fence, watching Seren and Hope in the pasture. Hope had grown fast, her legs long and graceful, her coat shining in the fading light. She galloped across the field, kicking up dirt, full of joy and wildness. Seren stood nearby, watching, her head high. Annette came to stand beside Beatrice. "You know what you've done here, don't you?" Annette said. Beatrice shook her head. "I'm just trying to help." "No," Annette said. "You've done more than that. You've proven that one person can change everything, that cruelty doesn't get the last word, that broken things can heal." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't save Donovan. I couldn't bring him back." "No," Annette said gently, "but you saved her, and all the others. And maybe, Beatrice, you saved yourself too." Beatrice nodded, unable to speak. That night she sat on the porch of the old farmhouse, now beautifully restored, painted white with blue shutters, and thought about Donovan. She thought about the life they'd planned, the children they'd never had, the future that had been stolen from them, and for the first time she felt something other than grief. She felt gratitude, gratitude for the time they'd had, gratitude for the love they'd shared. Gratitude for the way his death had led her here, to this place, to this purpose. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you." And somewhere, she believed, Donovan was smiling. 2 years later, Seren's Light had become one of the most respected animal sanctuaries in Wyoming. Beatrice had expanded the property, adding more pastures, more barns, a medical clinic. She'd partnered with local schools to create educational programs about animal welfare. She'd trained volunteers, built relationships with other sanctuaries, and worked with lawmakers to strengthen animal cruelty laws. Seren was unrecognizable from the mare Beatrice had found in that barn. She was healthy, strong, radiant. She had become a mother to more than just Hope. She watched over the other horses, nuzzled the frightened ones, stood guard when storms rolled through. Hope was nearly full-grown. She was gentle, curious, and utterly fearless. Beatrice had trained her slowly, patiently, and Hope trusted her completely. One spring morning, Beatrice saddled Hope for the first time. She led her into the pasture, climbed onto her back, and rode. Just a slow walk around the perimeter of the property. Seren followed, head high, eyes watchful. When Beatrice dismounted, she rested her forehead against Hope's neck and cried. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for choosing to live." And in that moment, she felt Donovan's presence, not as a ghost, not as a haunting, but as a quiet blessing. A reminder that love doesn't end, it transforms. 5 years after that cold January morning, Beatrice stood in the same field where she'd first found Seren. The old barn was gone, replaced by a beautiful structure filled with light and warmth. The pastures were green and lush. The animals were healthy and safe. Seren's Light was home to 37 animals now. Each one had a story. Each one had been saved. Beatrice had become a voice for the voiceless. She'd given speeches at conferences, written articles, appeared on national television. She'd raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for animal welfare. She'd inspired others to open sanctuaries, to foster animals, to fight for change. But her favorite part of every day was still the same. Walking through the pasture at dawn, watching Seren and Hope graze together, listening to the sounds of life, the nickers, the brays, the bleats that filled the air. One morning, a young girl arrived with her mother. The girl was maybe 10 years old with wide eyes and a shy smile. She'd heard about Seren's Light and begged her mother to visit. Beatrice gave them a tour, showed them the barns, introduced them to the animals, told them Seren's story. When they reached Seren's stall, the girl reached out her hand. Seren walked over, sniffed her palm, and nuzzled her gently. The girl's eyes filled with tears. "She was really chained up?" the girl asked. "She was really dying?" "Yes," Beatrice said softly. "But she's not dying anymore. She's thriving, because someone cared enough to stop, to listen, to help." The girl looked up at Beatrice. "I want to do that. When I grow up, I want to save animals." Beatrice smiled. "Then you will." "Mo!" As the girl and her mother walked away, Beatrice felt a deep, abiding peace. This was her purpose. This was her legacy. And it had all started with one broken mare, one act of compassion, and one refusal to look away. So, here's what I want you to take from this story. Cruelty exists. Suffering exists. Animals are abused, abandoned, left to die in silence. But there are also people like Beatrice, people who refuse to ignore the pull, who stop when something tells them to stop, who step into the darkness and choose to fight. If you've ever rescued an animal, you know the power of that choice. If you've ever wanted to, start now. Volunteer, donate, speak up, because every life matters. Every suffering creature deserves a chance. Seren was chained in that barn, pregnant and dying, and no one knew until Beatrice did, and that changed everything. If this story moved you, share it. Let people know that healing is possible, that hope is real. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe, because there are more stories like this, more animals who need voices, more people doing the impossible work of saving lives. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop, listen, and refuse to walk away.